Thanks for joining us. I am with Jordan Culver with Weissman Law Firm, and she's going to explain to us a little bit how the state of emergency can affect closings with real estate for buyers and for sellers. Thank you for coming and joining us
Thank you for having me.
Can you explain how a statewide emergency can affect you, even if you're not in the disaster area?
Yeah, so to start, if Governor Kemp does declare a state of emergency in your county, then what that looks like for the closing process is that all unexpired deadlines get pushed back for the period of time of that emergency advisory, but not to exceed 8 days. Now, what that can look like in a transaction that is not within the disaster zone or state of emergency advisory is perhaps the buyer and seller is closing on a transaction in a county where there is a state of emergency currently in effect. So that could adjust with timelines and the seller or buyer's availability, but also offices and locations, depending on where your lenders are located, where your attorneys are located, things like that.
And what parts are most affected by that?
The most affected part of the statewide emergency is certainly when it comes to the unexpired deadlines. So that could be your due diligence period, that could be your deadline to submit your earnest money deposit, or most importantly, your closing day. So what that looks like is, say your closing day was scheduled for February 2nd. Well, with the state of emergency currently in effect, you can push that back 8 days if you so choose, so that it is now February 10th. Now, the parties can agree to sign a mutual agreement to continue as normal, but there is going to be some adjustment with those deadlines in particular.
And what should buyers and sellers expect right now in terms of delays and flexibility?
I would say that individuals should expect to adjust their timelines and allow for more flexibility with this process. The closing process itself can already feel so strenuous to some buyers and sellers. So adding in some patience to the mix will certainly help. And hopefully your transaction, goes as normal, but they should be aware of potential shifts in schedule if there does need to be any adjustment with perhaps a due diligence period, or even when you actually close.
From a legal perspective, what is the biggest misconception from the clients as well as the agents?
The biggest misconception we are seeing right now is that everything is automatically extended. First and foremost, it's important to note that this only applies to contracts drafted under the Georgia Realtors Form 201, the GAR forms. So that is most in particular, and it only applies if the contract is already binding. If it becomes binding during this SOE period, state of emergency period, then these extensions don't apply. Another thing to keep in mind is that an expired deadline cannot be revived. So if your due diligence period ended on January 29th, and the SOE started on January 30th, that deadline has expired and you cannot revive it. Another thing is the SOE does not survive closing. So if your closing happened on January 29th and there's a 3-day occupancy period, then that does not get extended. But say your closing occurs during this SOE period, then that 3-day occupancy agreement would be pushed back based on the new closing date. And lastly, it's important to note that this applies per state of emergency advisory, not per transaction. So as we're currently seeing, there could be a couple back to back. It just kind of depends on the weather.
And what advice do you give for someone that is under contract right now or that are getting ready to be under contract? What advice do you have for them?
Absolutely. I would say take a deep breath. Do not panic. The GAR forms were drafted with the anticipation of this exact scenario. And so your real estate professionals are prepared. They understand the potential adjustments that may arise, and many people are going through this exact scenario as well. So I would say take a deep breath, don't panic.
And what are the best first steps if someone has concerns?
I would say call your agent, and they are going to be your guides throughout this entire process. But if you have any other questions, call your lenders, your attorneys, your insurance agents. You have a trusted team of real estate professionals doing everything in their power to get you to that closing table.
This is why having the right professionals matter, especially during situations like this. Thank you, Jordan.
Thank you so much for having me.
And make sure you look below and you will see how to get in contact with Jordan. If you have any more questions, feel free to reach out to her. And thank you so much for watching.